Welcome to day 5 of your ClickUp mini course. Now that you've understood how ClickUp works, so the hierarchy, the views, the task management, let's see how we can make everything standard so that each time you onboard someone new in your team, they just have to follow through something that has already been automated. There's 4 tools you can leverage to standardize your ClickUp workspace. There's recurring tasks, documents, templates, and automations. What's amazing is that you can combine those 4 to make your company's workflow as automated as possible. Starting off with recurring tasks. A recurring task is a task that repeats itself on a defined cycle. Let's say we're in this social media list and we have to create a client showcase post once a month. What we could do is say, I'm going to create a task called social media showcase post that I'll detail and specify and make it recurring every month. To do so, I'll just create my task. I'll add any subtasks if there needs to be: client interview, research, and proofreading. We have 3 subtasks to do for this post. Now that we have our tasks and subtasks, I'll just assign them to the right people. Let's say the project manager is this person, then this guy does the interview, research, and proofreading is this guy. Then we'll estimate our tasks. Remember, assign, estimate, set a timeline. Say this client interview will probably take 4 hours, research will probably take 4 hours, proofreading will probably take 2 hours. As you can see on the main task, ClickUp summed everything up to go to a 10-hour task estimate. Now that we've done our estimation, let's move on to the recurring task. I want to do a client showcase post once a month. I'll pick the next first of the month, and then I'll click set recurring here in the due date, and I'll move it to monthly. Then I'll say create a new task, which means each first of a month, ClickUp will create a new task called client showcase post. We'll say on schedule. That means that even if the previous one hasn't been closed, ClickUp will still create a new task, which makes sure that we can still work on the previous one if we're late on our schedule, and we have a track of all the client showcase posts. And we can also rename a client showcase post task to the actual client name, for example. And we'll say update status to open, which means that each time it creates a task, it will put the status as open. We don't want ClickUp to use the current status. For example, say the previous task is already in writing phase. Everything has to start from the ground up, so open. Then we'll save. That's it for the recurring task. Next, 1st of December, ClickUp will create a task. 1st of January, same, February, March, April, which means we have a recurring workflow for our client showcase post. Now moving on to documents. There are 3 ways to locate documents. You can either create a document here by just clicking plus on any space or folder. You could also create a document from a view by adding a view and calling it document, or you could create a document by opening up a task and adding a document here. What I recommend is to locate your documents either in your hierarchy or in your views. For the general documentation will you reuse, but make sure that you use the same location for everyone at your team. We don't want to have some documents in the views and some documents in the hierarchy. It creates a scattered and disorganized structure. We'll create a folder, call it docs, and then we can create all our documents here. Let's say social media process, Facebook ads process, Google Drive process. As you can see, we have our documents all available in one single folder. That's one way to organize things. Second way could be to completely delete this and then to create a document for each of your teams in the view. I personally prefer using the views because I feel like it eases out the navigation in the hierarchy. Now, when you need to relate some piece of information to a task, you could create the document straight in a task. That's also another option, and especially useful when you start to create recurring tasks or tasks templates, which we'll see later. To do so, you'll just add an attachment and call it document, and we'll call it client showcase interview. That means each time this client showcase post is created, it will create a new document with this title. What I could do is kind of templatize this document. That means you have to figure out every time a document is created, what is the common information that you have and that you don't want to type in each time you use the document of this type. In this showcase interview, we need to know the client name and we have 5 questions to ask them. What I've done here is I have actually asked ClickUp AI to create this template for me. That's where ClickUp AI comes in very handy, because you can just brief it, like create a set of 5 questions to ask a design client to showcase them on social media. It's created 5 questions already that I can insert, and then I can tweak to my need if I need to. I have my template, client name, and then for each new question, I can just hit enter and then start writing the client answers. As you can see, we've already combined recurring tasks and documents. Moving on to template. Templates are very powerful because they allow you to do a build one, use forever kind of system. Once you have your processes and workflow clear in your team, you could create anything as a template in ClickUp. It could be a doc template like we've seen. It could be a list template, a task template, a folder or space template. The most common templates I build for my clients are task templates and list templates. A list could represent a whole project roadmap that you could repeat for any client. I've created 11 tasks for this roadmap. Every time I get a new client for which I need to do a website design, I do the consultation, project brief, research, mapping, design, etc., etc. These 11 tasks are systemic, let's say. They always happen. Now for each task, you have to make sure that you set up the triangle that makes a well-refined task. We've talked about it already. It's assign, plan, estimate. I'm going to assign each task to someone in the team. I can just say it's going to be this person, then it's going to be Tom. Liz is going to do the research, then it's going to be Tom, then Liz, etc., etc. If you don't know who it's going to be out of everyone in the team, because it could change, you could assign the whole marketing team. We've defined our assignees. We'll move on to the time estimate. Estimate by experience as accurately as possible how long a task like this takes. So I'll say 2 hours, this one takes 3 hours, etc., etc. Once I've estimated everything, ClickUp can give me a sum of that whole project. All right, it's 33 hours. Let's move on to planning. The best way to do this is to batch edit your plan. You can select all your tasks by ticking that box here and define a start and end date. We'll say this project lasts on average a month. We'll say 1st of January till 31st of January, for example. Now that we've edited all our projects, start and end date, we'll probably refine things because we know that some tasks start before others and that there could be dependencies. We'll use the best view for this, which is the Gantt view. We'll just drag and drop your tasks the way you want. So as you can see, I've rescheduled all my tasks so that it follows a flow that's a bit more realistic. Then I'll just add my dependencies. If I know that a task depends on another, I can just use these little dots and create my dependencies. So now we've got everything. We have our assignees, our due dates, our time estimates, and I've even added dependencies. I could get even deeper there and add more information into the tasks like a description, subtasks, comments, whatever. But we'll just stop here and just save this as a template. I'll right click on the list and go into templates and save as template. And I'll call this website client template. From there, each time I start a project with a client, I can reuse it. I'll just go into my operations space, website folder, add a list. Here I'll say from template, and I'll just pick my website client template, use template. What you can do here is remap the dates, which is super interesting because the project doesn't have to start on the 1st of January. You can actually start as you started with your client. Instead of that, let's say it will start next week on Monday and skip weekends because people don't work on weekends usually, and import all tasks open and use template. My template has been created. It has assignees, dates, estimates. What's amazing, we'll go into the Gantt view for this, is that it actually created the task by remapping them all to next Monday. The project starts next Monday and we know that it will end up end of December because everything has been remapped to the right date. From there, you've systemized your whole project roadmap, and each time you have a new client, you just have to hit a button and we'll create the whole new project in a second. Another thing you can templatize is a simple task. Here we have a task which is a blog post template, and it has a set of subtasks like outline the post, write the draft, proofread, images, finalize. It has assignees, due dates, estimates, As always, from there, the same way, you just right click, say template, save as template. We'll just call it blog post template. Since it's been created as a template, you can just store it by drag and drop it into your processes space in the marketing folder. Then ClickUp allows you to define a default template for each list. You just right click on blog, say templates, default task template, pick the blog post template and set as default, which means each time you will create a task, it will use that exact template to create it. Say I want to write a blog article about the 5 best airplanes in 2023. Then I hit enter and ClickUp just created that whole new task with the outline, write, proofread, add, finalize. It's assigned to everybody, estimated, due dates, perfect. Let's move on to automation. It would take me hours to talk about all the automations you can do in ClickUp because the combinations are just infinite. If you go to automations on the top right, and go to browse, you'll be able to see all the available automations that ClickUp has pre-made for you. These are the most commonly used one, and you can have a look at them, and maybe some of them will relate to your process and you can reuse them. You also have external integrations, so you could actually connect ClickUp to external software like your Calendly, emails, HubSpot, etc. You could, for example, trigger ClickUp to send an email if a status changes, or update something in HubSpot if a custom field changes, etc., etc. What we will do is use a very basic automations here. We will say that each time a task has to go to approval, it's reassigned to me, the marketing manager. We'll say when this happens, then do that. Here, what we have to do is that when a status changes to approval, so we'll open this up and click approval, change the assignee to me and create. What happens here is that it created an automation that applies to that list, and that is very important because that means that it doesn't apply anywhere else. If you want it to apply somewhere else, you actually have to create it at folder or space level. We can just define a name for our automation. I advise you to do that so that you don't get lost if you have a lot of them, and we'll just call it reassign approval tasks to me, Ramzi. All right, I'll just close it. What happens here is that if that person were to finish their task and just ask for approval, it will just reassign automatically the task to me. If I open up the task, as you can see, it's been assigned to me automatically. Same if we do it for any task in the list, it will trigger that automation and just reassign the task to me. And again, the amount of automations is infinite. You could say, if an assignee is added somewhere, then do this. If a comment is added, then do this. Custom field, due date, etc., etc. There are so many use cases of automations. If you want to understand which automations you can leverage, you can just go through a discovery call with me and we'll get to understand your workflow and I can recommend you some automations. Now that you've understood how you can use documents, recurring tasks, task templates, list templates, automations, it's all about you harnessing your creativity and your understanding of your processes to combine all of these together so that when someone hits the add task button, just create the right template and then use the right automations so that you can save a few minutes each day for each of your members times everyone that works in your team, which means hours at the end of the year. That's it for today. We've pretty much covered everything you can do in ClickUp. It's your turn to use it to its full potential. There's one last thing I want to talk about. It's execution. How you can make sure that your team is moving forward and track the right metrics to make sure that all the best practices in ClickUp are in place.